At 19 years old, Emily Harper owned exactly $32. Not $3,200. Not $320. 32. She knew because she checked her bank account every morning. The number never changed. Her apartment was gone. Her job was gone. And after 6 months of trying to survive in the city, hope was disappearing too. 3 years earlier, Emily's mother had died after a long illness. Her father had vanished long before that. The few relatives she had barely acknowledged her existence. When things became difficult, nobody offered help. By 19, Emily understood she was on her own. For several weeks, she slept inside her aging hatchback. At first, she convinced herself it was temporary. Then winter arrived. Cold nights turned into freezing nights. Gas money became food money. Food money became impossible. One rainy afternoon, while parked outside a grocery store, Emily received a phone call. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, she ignored those. Something told her not to. Emily Harper? Yes. My name is Robert Collins. I'm handling the estate of Margaret Harper. Emily frowned. Margaret Harper. Her grandmother. A woman she hadn't seen since childhood. I thought she died years ago. No. 3 months ago. Emily sat upright. The lawyer continued. She left you her property. Property? The word sounded ridiculous. Nobody in her family owned anything valuable. What kind of property? There was a pause. Then the lawyer sighed. A cabin. That sounded even less promising. 3 days later, Emily drove north. The journey took nearly 5 hours. Roads became smaller. Towns became rarer. Eventually, civilization disappeared entirely. Dense forests stretched across rolling hills. Then she saw the cabin, and immediately understood why nobody else wanted it. The structure looked ancient. Weathered locks, sagging porch, broken shutters, a rusted metal roof. Tall weeds surrounded everything. The place looked abandoned for decades. The lawyer met her at the property. You sure about this? He asked. Emily laughed. I live in my car. Fair point. The front door creaked open. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight. The interior looked surprisingly large. Not beautiful, not comfortable, but solid. There was a stone fireplace, several bedrooms, a kitchen, furniture covered with sheets. For the first time in months, Emily saw something she desperately needed. A future. Small, uncertain, but real. The lawyer handed her a ring of keys. Then an envelope. Your grandmother wanted you to have this. The handwriting on the front immediately caught her attention. For Emily. After the lawyer left, she opened it. The letter was short. If you're reading this, then life probably became difficult before it became better. Emily smiled sadly. That sounded accurate. The note continued. Stay in the cabin. No matter what anyone offers. That was strange. Who would offer anything for this place? The final sentence was stranger. Trust the floorboards beneath the fireplace. Emily frowned, then laughed. The cabin clearly came with mysteries. The next few weeks became the best weeks she'd experienced in years. The roof leaked. The plumbing barely worked. Half the windows needed repairs. But it was hers. Every improvement felt meaningful. She cleaned, painted, repaired. Slowly the cabin came back to life. Then the strange things began. First came the visitors. 2 men arrived one afternoon. Expensive truck. Expensive clothes. Expensive smiles. They introduced themselves as land buyers. We'd like to make an offer. Emily looked around. For this cabin? Yes. That seemed absurd. The offer was $75,000. For a rundown cabin in the middle of nowhere. Emily immediately refused. The men left. 3 days later, another visitor arrived. Different person. Same purpose. This offer reached $100,000. Again, she refused. Now she was suspicious. Something wasn't right. Nobody paid that much for a ruined cabin. Especially not multiple people. That night, she reread her grandmother's letter. Stay in the cabin. No matter what anyone offers. Clearly Margaret knew something. The question was what? Emily spent the next week searching the property. She checked closets, drawers, basement shelves, attic trunks. Nothing. Then she remembered the final instruction. Trust the floorboards beneath the fireplace. One rainy evening, she knelt in front of the massive stone fireplace. The floorboards looked normal. At least initially. Then she noticed slight differences. Several boards appeared newer than the others. Not new, just newer. Almost deliberately placed. Her pulse quickened. The next morning she borrowed a pry bar from a neighbor. Carefully she lifted the first board. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third. A hollow sound echoed upward. Emily froze. Slowly she removed the remaining boards. An iron ring appeared beneath them, attached to a steel hatch. Her heart began racing. No way. The hatch looked old. Very old, yet surprisingly well preserved. She gripped the ring and pulled. The metal door resisted, then slowly opened. Cold air rushed upward. A staircase descended into darkness. Far below the cabin, Emily grabbed a flashlight. Every instinct told her to stop. Instead, she started walking. The stairs spiraled downward for nearly 2 stories, then opened into something impossible. A vault. A massive underground vault. Concrete walls. Steel supports. Rows of shelves stretching into darkness. Crates stacked floor to ceiling. The chamber looked larger than the cabin itself. At the center stood a large wooden table, and resting on it was an envelope. The paper looked almost new. Across the front were 3 words. "You found it." Emily slowly opened the envelope. Inside sat a letter from Margaret. The first sentence made her blood run cold. "If you've reached the vault, then the people searching for it have probably found you too." Emily frowned. Searching? People? Before she could continue reading, a loud engine echoed above. Then another. And another. Her stomach tightened. She rushed toward a security monitor mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life. Outside the cabin, 3 black SUVs had just pulled into the driveway. Emily's pulse hammered. 3 black SUVs sat outside the cabin. The engines idled. Headlights illuminated the clearing. Several men stepped out. None looked like hikers. None looked like tourists. They moved with confidence, like they already knew exactly what they had come to find. Emily turned back to her grandmother's letter. Her hands trembled as she continued reading. "If they've arrived, then my suspicions were correct." That wasn't reassuring. She kept reading. "The vault is not the treasure." Emily frowned. If the vault wasn't the treasure, then what was? The next page contained maps. Dozens of maps. Property boundaries. Survey markers. Geological reports. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Then one phrase appeared repeatedly. Harper Ridge Aquifer. Emily had no idea what that meant. The letter explained. Nearly 40 years earlier, Margaret Harper's husband had worked as a hydrologist. During a regional survey, he discovered an enormous underground freshwater reservoir beneath thousands of acres of forest. At the time, few people understood its significance. Years later, corporations did. Freshwater became increasingly valuable. Several companies attempted to acquire the surrounding land. Margaret refused every offer. Instead, she quietly purchased additional property, then created a trust, and hid the ownership records inside the vault. Emily's eyes widened. The next page contained a recent valuation. Current estimated trust value, $158 million. She read the number twice. Then a third time, $158 million. The amount felt unreal. The men outside weren't looking for gold. They were looking for control. Control of the water. A loud slam echoed through the security monitor. The cabin door. Someone had entered. Emily's stomach tightened. The letter continued. "The trust belongs to the last living Harper heir." That was her. The next paragraph was even more alarming. "The original ownership documents are hidden beneath the survey table." Emily immediately looked around. Near the center of the vault sat a large metal table covered with maps. Beneath it was a concealed drawer. Inside she found dozens of folders. Property deeds, trust agreements, water rights, environmental records. Everything needed to prove ownership. Then she noticed another envelope. Smaller, addressed directly to her. For Emily alone. Slowly she opened it. The handwriting belonged to Margaret. "Emily, I know life has not been easy. If you're reading this, then I wasn't there when you needed me most." Tears immediately formed in her eyes. She continued, "That is my greatest regret. But I never stopped watching from a distance." Emily froze. Watching? The letter explained. Margaret had followed her life through school records, social workers, and occasional updates from distant relatives. Not because she didn't care. Because a legal dispute over the trust made direct contact dangerous. Anyone connected to the property became a target. For years, Margaret feared putting Emily in danger. The old woman had waited. Protected the trust. Protected Emily. And hoped one day they would finally meet again. That day never came. Emily wiped away tears. The next line nearly broke her. "You were always the person I intended to leave everything to." For several moments, she couldn't continue. Nobody had ever planned a future around her. Nobody. Above her, Another crash echoed through the cabin. The intruders were searching. Fast. Emily forced herself to finish the letter. The final page contained a simple instruction. Use the north passage. Beneath the words sat a rough sketch of the vault. Emily quickly located the marked section. A steel shelf concealed a hidden door. She pulled a lever. Part of the wall slid open. A narrow tunnel appeared. Of course, Margaret had planned an escape route. The woman clearly trusted nobody. Another voice echoed faintly through the vault's stairwell. They found it. The men had reached the hidden hatch. Time was running out. Emily grabbed the document case, stuffed the letters into her backpack, then entered the tunnel. The hidden passage stretched beneath the forest. Cold air rushed through the darkness. Behind her came distant shouting. The intruders had entered the vault. One voice yelled angrily, "The documents are gone." Another cursed. Emily allowed herself a small smile. Good. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, she emerged inside an old ranger cabin nearly a mile away. The structure looked abandoned, but someone had maintained it. A satellite phone sat on a desk. Beside it rested another envelope. Margaret again. If you reach this cabin, call the lawyer first. A business card sat inside. Emily dialed immediately. The attorney answered before the second ring. Emily Harper? Her eyes widened. You know who I am? We've been waiting for this call for years. The lawyer explained everything. Margaret had anticipated attempts to seize the trust after her death. Multiple legal protections were already in place. The moment Emily produced the original documents, ownership became unquestionable. Authorities were contacted. Investigators arrived. And the people searching for the vault suddenly found themselves facing a very different problem. The investigation uncovered years of illegal attempts to acquire protected land. Several companies had secretly purchased surrounding properties through shell corporations. Others had used intimidation. A few had crossed legal lines entirely. The evidence hidden in Margaret's vault exposed everything. By the end of the year, multiple lawsuits were underway. Several executives faced criminal charges. And the Harper Trust remained exactly where Margaret intended. Protected. A year later, Emily stood on the porch of the restored cabin. The transformation was remarkable. The roof had been repaired. The windows replaced. The overgrown weeds were gone. Warm light shone through every room. The place finally felt alive again. The trust continued generating revenue through carefully managed conservation agreements and water rights partnerships. The forest remained protected. The aquifer remained protected. And for the first time in her life, Emily had stability. Real stability. Not temporary. Not borrowed. Permanent. One evening she sat beside the fireplace where everything began. The same floorboards. The same hidden hatch beneath them. The same cabin everyone else considered worthless. Most people believed she inherited a ruined cabin. Others believed she discovered a fortune. Neither was entirely true. What Margaret really left her was something much more valuable. A place to belong. A future worth building. And proof that even when life seemed completely broken, hope could still be hiding beneath the floorboards, waiting to be found.